For over 2 decades, the Holcim Foundation for Sustainable Construction has organized a design competition that has altered the conversation globally. The Holcim Foundation Awards is now entering its 8th cycle at a time when awareness of the climate crisis has never been higher. So how exactly does this competition work? How is this judged? And who decides what is or isn't sustainable? Laura Viscovich, here with me today, is the Executive Director of the Foundation.
When the awards were being designed at the outset, they really were designed first and foremost thinking regionally. 5 regions, 5 regional juries. It's almost as if there were 5 competitions in one.
Who decides which entry wins? Is it even possible to pick a global winner? Who gets to make the call?
We have a jury of 7 people, the architecture voice, the engineering voice, planning, even policy, environmental science. We had some wonderful people accepting once again to be on our 2025 juries.
Making a submission to a design competition takes time and effort. The stakes seem higher when the focus is sustainable construction.
I wouldn't say that we've moved the needle globally, but I think that we can safely say that we've nudged the needle.
Will this cycle produce the next big idea? Amongst the winners this year, who will be the next generation of change makers? Stay tuned for my conversation with Laura. This video is sponsored by the Holcim Foundation for Sustainable Construction. More on them later. Laura Viscovich, welcome to Ecogradia.
Thanks, as always, Nirmal.
Well, it's great to have you. Now, you are the Executive Director of the Holcim Foundation for Sustainable Construction, a post that you've had for almost 3 years. And amongst the many things that the foundation does, it hosts a competition every few years. The Holcim Foundation Awards has been called the most significant prize in sustainable design in the world today. On the 11th of February, the window for submissions to the 8th cycle of the awards will close. Now, I will put on my practitioner's hat. I am busy, too busy. My clients are difficult. Projects are delayed. Why should I do this? Why should I carve out time to submit my project to the Holcim Foundation Awards? I mean, yes, there is the possibility of winning money and fame if I win. But let me flip the question. What if I don't win?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Nirmal. And I would say that it's really the opportunity to actually take a step back and look at their projects maybe a bit differently to how they've been having to present them to their clients. Because, as you said, we're the world's largest competition for sustainable design. So the submission form is really built around questions that focus fully on the sustainability of the project. And often we'll find that people learn things about their project, or at least how to articulate the benefits of their project, whether it's from the economic perspective, environmental, social, aesthetic, etc. They're having to put in very short paragraphs why their project is sustainable across these 4 criteria. So I do believe that, even if they're not winners, they take away a more structured narrative that hopefully can serve them well when they're dealing with other stakeholders.
So before we get deeper into the conversation, full disclosure to our listeners, I have been a juror of the Holcim Awards twice before. And since then, Laura, we've collaborated in various capacities, including this podcast.
Yeah, no, it was just such a pleasure when I joined 3 years ago. You were one of the people on a short list that my predecessor said were just super important to be speaking to, really because of the knowledge that you've got having worked in this space for the whole of your career, and the fact that you bring in yourself a very holistic approach to thinking about design in a sustainable way. So yeah, it's been a pleasure working with you these 3 years, Nirmal.
Let's talk about the awards a bit more in detail. So the Foundation Awards have been around for 2 decades. You've had, 30,000 entries from 138 countries. I mean, that's a lot. Yeah. Tell me, has the foundation, its award cycles, and many of the acts of education and advocacy, has that moved the sustainability needle worldwide?
So that is a tricky question to answer. I wouldn't want to be as presumptuous to say that we've moved the needle globally, but I think that we can safely say that we've nudged the needle. When we started 20 years ago, we really were the only competition that was focusing fully on sustainable design, but also with the forums that were held every 3 years, we were connecting experts on topics that, that today in the community are being spoken about, but 10, 15 years ago really weren't. And so I think through creating this community and then seeing others in the last 5 years actually almost not copy pasting, but we see lots more competitions with sustainability categories. We see many more conferences on different aspects of sustainable construction. So I like to think, as they say, imitation's the highest form of flattery. So, we can look at that and say, yeah, we've made a dent, but obviously it's only a small one. We're a small organization, and we do believe it's important to work with all the other teams out there who are pushing in the same direction.
One of the things that has been remarkable is the community that you've created over the last 2 decades. And this is, students who've gone on to be architects, jurors and ambassadors and experts. I mean, you've got a couple of people that have won awards that have gone on to win Pritzker prizes. So that in itself, the access to this is significant. If today I want information about sustainability or how it's being done in different parts of the world, I have easy access to it on your website. Tell me a little bit about this community and this kind of community building that's taken place in parallel with the awards.
The community has grown organically, so with the support of the foundation. So all of the events, whether it's award ceremonies, the forums, the fellowships that we're running today, we're always pooling and asking contributors from that community to actually support and engage with us. But in doing so, they also engage with one another. So it actually grows organically even without the foundation putting any effort in. Because what I've seen, and I've spoken to a lot of past winners, jury members, etc., who then are in touch and they're offering one another opportunities, teaching opportunities, collaboration on projects. We've got really lots of examples of that. So I get a lot of feedback saying how wonderful it's been from that perspective to create new opportunities in their careers.
In addition to the awards, the foundation has several other educational initiatives. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, so we're really excited. We decided to step up a little bit our support of the next generation. We did used to have a category next gen in the awards,
remember, yes.
and which always was great, and we had some wonderful winners who we're still in touch with and are very fervent members of our community. But that was run every 3 years, and it only really rewarded a handful of people. So we wanted to expand, and we decided to launch a fellowships program. So we've been working with different universities around the world that serve as kind of as a hub for us to launch and recruit candidates from across the region. So right now there's one running in Mexico City with UNAM. Mm-hmm. It's got 20 students from, I think, 14 countries around Latin America who are all in Mexico City having a deep dive for 2 weeks with practitioners and academics and really just having a whirlwind tour of what sustainable construction means in Mexico, but what it could mean in the rest of the region as well. So we're excited about that. We're doing it in several places, and we're seeing that the people who are benefiting are just enjoying it. Mm. They're saying that it's a life-changing experience for them. So it's very gratifying to see that.
Could you give me an example of maybe a collaboration or somebody who's reached out to someone else that has been transformative in some small way?
We now have Loretta Castro from Mexico on the foundation board. Loretta won firstly in LATAM with her hydropuncture project, the water park in Mexico City. She won the regional award, went on to win the global gold, I think, back in 2017. And she has told me of experiences of how she was teaching in Yunnan, but then it opened doors to be able to go and teach. She's been teaching in the US, and then she's been able to open doors for winners that she's met on the juries, for them to go on and have more teaching opportunities. And I think for me, so it's a kind of, it's a rolling ball that keeps on going and accumulates more impact as people get to know one another.
Do you track past winners and projects? I mean, do you know why some go on to succeed and others don't? I mean, what determines success?
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, the foundation has always tracked winners. Now, what I would say is that prior to me arriving at the foundation, the competition criteria was open to all types of projects, but unbuilt and mostly still at the ideas stage. So there were visionary ideas that were being awarded. And because they were visionary, often they didn't yet have a client, they didn't get built. So when we look back in the history of the winners prior to 2023, I would say it's probably like a third of the projects that actually came to fruition. And that takes years as well. I mean, we've been able to see that we know from the past that winners that were successful, what they told us was that winning a Holcim Foundation Award did enable them to more easily secure funding for their project, or to just have the stamp of approval of an endorsement of an international organization that's committed to sustainable development in the sector. So whether it's a sort of financial benefit or more of an image and reputation benefit, I think that's what has helped some winning projects be successful. Of course, there are others, and often, I've seen a lot of projects that won that were maybe in conflict zones, where unfortunately the political context is just such that it's almost impossible for those projects to get realized, and that's a sad thing. But I think the award is also the juries award those projects to create hope, to give hope that they have to keep pushing to try and get those projects constructed. I will just say that since 18 months with the past cycle 2023, we changed the criteria a little bit. So we started to ask for projects that are commissioned, that do have client support, and that are a late design phase. So this means that going forward, our hope is that we'll have more real world projects that we'll be able to track, to document. And we did revisit for our Words with Winners film series this year. We've revisited around 8 projects that have been completed over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's been wonderful, because to go and hear their stories and also the timeline of, again, the struggles that they have, but then the reward of seeing it actually come to fruition, that's been really gratifying for the team to see.
How has the world changed from a sustainability standpoint? Looking back at a winning entry from the first cycle to the latest one, how are they different, do you think?
I mean, I think one big difference is linked to what I was just saying, that in 2004, there would have been a lot of ideas on paper, maybe introducing some of these ideas that are today a little bit more mainstream in the design community around circular reuse of materials. I think that those were ideas 20 years ago. Now we see that actually being implemented in the projects that we're receiving. But I mean, talking about that, whether sustainability is how mainstream is it in relation to 20 years ago? It seems to me, and I've only been working at the foundation for 3 years, but when I speak to everybody in the design community, I think it's really front of mind. I mean, it's everybody is now really engaged and knowing that it's a non-negotiable. And the issue is that the whole value chain isn't yet there, and that's the next 20 years, I suppose, that we have to keep fighting for. Now, I think that one thing that bothers me is, and you mentioned 20 years ago, for many people, sustainability equaled green. So people were focused on the environmental protection side of sustainability. And I fear that that's still slightly the case. So there's still a confusion. Many people equate sustainability with the environmental sustainability, and they're not looking at it through the lens of sustainable development as it was defined in the late 80s with the Brundtland Report, that sustainability is economic growth, environmental protection, social equity. And so a sustainable building project has to actually be trying to balance and work with all of those aspects and get the best end result possible. And I think we're still in a climate where the mainstream is focused more heavily on the environment, which is obviously absolutely necessary, but we see the social side often being separated. So design, categories in competitions will want to separate out affordable housing and social topics. But for foundation, we believe that all projects have to be looked at holistically.
Coming up, I asked Laura if design competitions like this favor certain projects, or do they attract a wide range of entries that mirror what is happening in the construction sector? But first, let me quickly give you a few more details about the Holcim Foundation Awards. It has a total prize pool of $1 million. Plus, it can transform professional careers. Francis Carey, the acclaimed architect, won the Global Gold Award in 2012. Prior to winning, few had heard of him. And since, his profile has skyrocketed. At Ecogradia, we celebrate award winners like Carey. Last year, we spotlighted the 2023 winners in an exclusive webinar series. Who knows, this year, you might well be a part of this inspiring group of changemakers. The portal for online submissions for the next cycle of the Holcim Awards is now open, and it will stay open for registrations until 11th February 2025. It's free. Find out more in our show notes or at awards.holcimfoundation.org. In sustainability, we often talk about scalability and replicability. The problem with projects that are too unique or too specific to context, the small, precious projects, is that their wisdom cannot be easily transferred, right? There is a gap between good ideas and widespread implementation. Have past winners, for instance, affected changes in policy or industry standards or practice norms? Have they created this ripple effect where they get to the DNA of how we create rather than just these one-off projects?
Yeah. So I would say that the topic of urban infill is maybe one that we could look at, that there have been many winners, often at quite a small scale, but of ways of how you deal with the unused space in a city. And of course, our emblematic winner and then board member for 10 years, Alejandro Aravena, he won with his incremental housing, but we had lots of other winners kind of proposing ideas. And I think that was, I hope that they were being inspired by one another to push for those types of ideas. One was using the space above parking lots, and I've just seen in another competition a similar project that's been awarded, and I think that that's helping to influence regulation today. Another example that we're proud of is a winner from Colombia in 2013 or 14, I think, in Medellin, where the team looked at repurposing two obsolete water tanks. There were 4 in total. There were 2 still in operation, 2 were obsolete, and they looked at how can they use that space and put it to the benefit of the local community by embedding it into some kind of parkland, and that, I think, did actually drive policy. It changed for urban development in Colombia. So an example of replicability, and I think this was actually awarded on your watch, Nirmal, which is excellent, it was a project called Billion Bricks. And the idea behind the concept was fitting the solar panels on very small dwellings, but making those a means of resource, so that if you put enough of them together, this community can be actually creating an economic source of income that not only is giving energy to those houses, but beyond. So I think it's a small project, but with a huge potential, and most of all, a huge replicability in so many different areas of the world. And we're excited to see the team actually making progress on that in the Philippines.
There is another challenge with a competition that's global like yours, which is that, submissions are going to vary a lot depending on country and region. And they should, because really sustainability is largely local. It's contextual. It's born from what happens in each of these places according to climate and culture and economy. How do you create a level playing field in a competition that's global?
So I'm lucky in that my predecessor, when the awards were being designed at the outset, they really were designed first and foremost thinking regionally. So the notion of having 5 regions, 5 regional juries, and then pulling those into a global award, which was what used to happen. That at least it's almost as if there were 5 competitions in one for a global competition. Then, of course, depending on the region, there are always, even with it, there are regions that have huge diversity, even of climate within them. So it's impossible. Unfortunately, we cannot move to doing 12 region. We actually did look at could we potentially even do more, have even more precise looking at climatic zones, for example. But we then realised it's not feasible in the time that's available to us. So we stick with the 5 regional juries. But I think that then also it's important we try to give the jury guidance about what we are looking for in terms of winning projects. So the criteria of, is this project really, what is it doing to respond to our goals and principles for sustainable construction? So we really brief the juries that is the main purpose of the competition. And then on the submission side, we try to give as much guidance and tips. So we revamped the submission platform 2 years ago. And obviously with new technologies, it's great. You can put in lots of tips and guidance. So along the process, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people submitting to understand also what we mean in a question if there's no clarity. And then on top of that, we have an online help desk, and we do receive quite a lot of questions. So we're trying to at least be as available as possible and as clear as possible in what we would like to see in those submission forms.
I remember my 2 stints as jury of the Holcim Foundation Awards. It was pretty intense. The judging process was really a conversation on what the future will look like. Sometimes you picked a winner because this is where we collectively agreed we want to be, right? So judging can be emotional at times, and not everyone agrees all the time. How do you make sure, that emotion plays a part, but not too much?
There can be disagreement, but I think there's always respect within the jury, and it is the role of the jury chair to allow space for everybody to be able to give their feedback and and give their impressions on projects and defend projects that they believe in, and then to chair and to moderate and to lead the jury and steer the jury towards a final decision. So I think, yes, there was also emotion in the last cycle, and sometimes good emotions. I mean, really passionate debate around ethically the importance of rewarding some projects because of the message that sends of hope as well.
Let me ask you about juries. I mean, in the coming cycle, you've got Kjetil Thorsen from Snøhetta leading the Europe jury, Sandra Barclay of Barclay and Cruz, who leads the Latin America, Lina Godme Architecture leads Middle East and Africa.
Yeah.
Now, the juries will invariably affect the credibility of the award, right? They also say a lot about what the competition stands for. How do you select jurors?
Right. Well, I mean, you've just summed up. It's super important, and we do spend a lot of time with the team. First of all, you put together a long list, but sometimes we're trying to make sure we include experts who have served previously to make sure there's some continuity, but also people that we see coming up as well in the field, or people who are clearly very established, to be able to bring the credibility to the competition. But what we're looking for most of all is, when we have a jury of 7 people, is a diversity of expertise. So making sure we have, the architecture voice, the engineering voice, if possible, planning, even policy, environmental science. So trying to have a mix. Then you're looking at geographies, and finally, obviously, gender. But that's the really tricky piece, is this intersection, and so it takes, I think, to put together all of our 5 juries. We probably were working on it for at least 4 months, not full time. We're doing a lot of other things at the same time, but it's a process, and we were very, very happy this year that we had some wonderful people accepting once again to be on our 2025 juries.
Laura, tell me, 3 years in, what has surprised you about the job?
Wow, so much. I mean, coming in from other industries, well, probably, I think there are several things. I think one thing that has really surprised me is that, especially architects, and obviously we're working with everybody in the design community, but I've met so many practicing architects who also teach, and who also contribute. If we have a program running, whether it's the juries or the fellowships or a conference, and we're looking for speakers, they also give time to those kind of activities. And I've never been in an industry where you have a discipline who's actually still bridging kind of that academia and knowledge sharing and practice. And I find that really, really interesting. I don't know how they do it, wearing all these different hats, but I like the fact that there's obviously an interest in going back to school, being with students, learning from the students, whilst also imparting their knowledge to the students. And I mean, I've seen that even firsthand with some of the programs that we run. So I find that just really, really cool. And then I would say what surprised me, I think I had no idea of the complexity of the built environment and the value chain, and how it can be wonderful that you have huge communities who are all convinced that building sustainably is the right way. But then if you don't have the investment, you don't have the construction companies who are going to, also look to be super sustainable, then, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think that complexity is something that surprised me a little bit.
Tell me about some of the projects that moved you, that you think in a small way transformed your point of view on what sustainability means.
Yes. In the very first couple of months when I joined, I had the honor of sitting next to a project team that had just won I think that's silver for Europe. And it was a team made up of an architect based in London, and a gentleman who had lived through the atrocities of the Balkan War and who had a charity that was now focusing on peace in the region. And their project was to transform a war-torn house into a peace centre, bridging two villages that had really been on either side of the divide. So a very, very loaded project, and an extremely meaningful one. Around the topic of peace and how a building can actually help bring together two communities that had been at war. So it was very moving to spend some time with these two gentlemen, and I'd send them my regards in this call.
What kinds of projects or ideas do you hope to see in this upcoming cycle?
Right. So we discussed a little earlier on, it's always wonderful to see the smaller, the single building in a community. We love those projects. We would love to see more master plans, neighborhood, city scale. And I suppose in that, looking at how can we in the future have projects that are inspirations for how cities can be built, rebuilt, etc. So for me, it's just going to be interesting to see the scales of the projects that we get this time round. We have a hard close for registrations to the competition on the 11th of February. And people who have registered still then have a week. If they haven't had time to finalize their projects, they have one more week until February 18th to actually submit. But it's super important that people do register if they've got a project that they want to submit. 11th of February is the deadline for that.
Last question then. What gives you hope?
Yeah, what gives me hope? We've talked a lot about the community of the foundation. Obviously, the team works really hard to make these initiatives happen, the awards, the fellowships. We've got a forum coming up later this year. And it all pays off when you're in a room with a winner, a fellow, an expert who maybe was a winner 10 years ago and who's now contributing to one of our programs. The energy and passion is infectious. So having those moments as part of your working day is special and does give you hope, because obviously, your daily grind, and when we see the challenge ahead of us, it sometimes doesn't feel so hopeful, but people give me hope, and the people that we're surrounded with at the foundation, the community that we've built, that gives me hope.
So I will see you in April when you are here in Singapore for the APAC, the Asia Pacific jury meeting.
Yes, I'm super looking forward to it. It's the first time I'm coming back since 2017, I think. So I'm really excited. Yeah, I'd be happy to see Singapore again.
Thank you, Laura, for the wonderful work you do with the foundation and to your team. I wish you good luck, and I'm looking forward to see how this turns out.
Very much appreciate all your support as well. Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Thanks also to you for joining in. If you've enjoyed today's conversation and haven't done so yet, please click the subscribe button on this screen to always know when a new episode is out. You can also follow Ecogradia on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, on Instagram and other social media, and subscribe to our newsletter on our website at ecogradia.com. This was the final episode of Season 5. Over the coming weeks, we will take a short break and come back soon with more unique content. Until we meet next, this is Nirmal signing off in Singapore.